information, Tony. I should mention that, I don't know if Teresa did, the English department used to put on dramatic reading of the Second Shepherd every year.
It's legendary, but it was before my time.
Was it? Well, I remember it going on interminably. Anyway, my little talk today is entitled The Chesterton's Ethics of Elfland. G.K. Chesterton's Orthodoxy, which was first published in 1908, is one of his early books, and some think the very best book he ever wrote. Its rival is The Everlasting Man. Its publication was occasioned by an earlier book called Heretics, which he published in 1905. In Heretics, he criticized representative of modern thought, not ancient Christianity. In Orthodoxy, he offers to the public his own thoughts, especially the thinking that led him to believe in Christianity. At the time of writing Orthodoxy, G.K. was an Anglican. He became a Catholic in 1922. In the first chapter, G.K. says that his purpose is not to show that his faith or philosophy is true from every standpoint. Doing that would be too big an undertaking. He proposes instead to show that his faith, his Christian faith, fulfills a double spiritual need of nearly everyone in this Western society, I'm quoting now, which I live. I should mention that G.K. has reservations, and I must pass over here about the Far Eastern societies and the religion of Buddhism, for example. That double spiritual need is, in his words, quotation, the mixture of the familiar and the unfamiliar, which Christendom has rightly named romance. Romance here means not a literary genre, but what G.K. takes to be the common ground between him and any reader of his book. Quotation, romance means an active and imaginative life, picturesque and full of a poetical curiosity, a life such as Western man at any rate always seems to have desired. What does G.K. understand this need for a mixture of the familiar and unfamiliar to be? What does he mean by an active, imaginative life full of poetical curiosity? Apparently, the thinking of the moderns he criticized in the earlier book did not meet this need. How then did Christianity meet it? The fundamentals of the answer are best explained, I think, in the fourth chapter of Orthodoxy, titled The Ethics of Elfland. The pages of this short chapter may well be the best pages in the best book that G.K. ever wrote. Now, I can't hope to provide you anything more than a brief outline of G.K.'s Ethics of Elfland, or in another formulation, the philosophy, it always alliterates, the philosophy of fairyland. These phrases describe the outlook he had before he could write, and the feelings he had before he could think, and that persisted after he could write and after he was able to think. Nor can I hope to reproduce the distinctive style of this alliterating apologist who loves to multiply paradoxes. That must be savored in personal reading. A few excerpts here read aloud from the chapter in the course of this little outline will have to suffice. Now, the chapter begins with an admission of G.K.'s own political biases as a grown man. He says, my first and fundamental bias was a belief in liberalism, which means to him belief in democracy, which means the common man as self-governing, and the traditions of the common men who were our ancestors, that is, in the famous formula, the democracy of the dead. What caused these biases is something basic to GK's entire outlook. Quotation, "My first and last philosophy, that which I believe in with unbroken certainty, I learned in the nursery. I generally learned it from a nurse, that is, from the solemn and star-appointed priestess at once of both democracy and tradition. The things I believe most then, the things I believe most now, are the things called fairy tales. They seem to me to be the entirely reasonable things. They are not fantasies. Compared with them, other things are fantastic. Compared with them, religion and rationalism are both abnormal, though religion is abnormally right and rationalism is abnormally wrong." End of quotation here. Now, the ethic and philosophy that come from being fed on fairy tales teach many notable things. For example, Cinderella teaches the same lesson as the Magnificat, exaltadet humbles. He has exalted the lowly. Beauty and the Beast teaches that a thing must be loved before it is lovable. But it is not such specific ethical laws sponsored in Elfland that GK signals out for our attention. Rather, it is, he says, the whole spirit of its law. What is that spirit? In summary, this is how GK explains it. He says that fairy tales founded in him sentiments leading to two convictions. First, that this world is a wild and startling place which might have been quite different, but which is delightful. Second, that before this wildness and delight, one may well be modest and submit to the queerest limitations of so queer a kindness. Modern thought opposed these two convictions, and the resulting shock produced in GK two spontaneous reactions that over the years became for him his ultimate attitudes to life, the soil for the seeds of doctrine, even before he had given thought to Christianity, which of course in time became his mature belief, as the whole of Orthodoxy indicates. The scientific world talked of fatalism, or the modern world talked of scientific fatalism. The laws that govern the entire universe without freedom or forgiveness, unfolding without fault, and from the beginning. GK argues that fatalism was false. Why? Because the modern scientific man and outlook is deceived into thinking that mere associations are necessary causes, unalterable laws. In the philosophy of fairyland, there is a rational recognition of necessity. There is also something else. So let me quote GK on this matter. There are, he writes, certain sequences and developments, cases of one thing following another, which are, in the true sense, necessary. Such are mathematical and merely logical sequences. But that necessity does not apply to the world of physical facts and events. Listen now to what I take to be the most important passage in the most important chapter. GK writes, "I observed that learned men in spectacles were talking of the actual things that happen, dawn and death and so on, as if they were rational and inevitable. They talked as if the fact that trees bear fruit were just as necessary as the fact that two and one trees make three, but it is not." I'm quoting him now. "There is an enormous difference by the test of fairyland which is the test of the imagination. You cannot imagine 2 and 1 not making 3, but you can easily imagine trees not growing fruit. You can imagine them growing golden candlesticks or tigers hanging on by the tail. We have always, in our fairy tales, kept this sharp distinction between the science of mental relations, in which there are really laws, and the science of physical facts, in which there are no laws, but only weird repetitions. We live in bodily miracles. Well, sorry, we believe in bodily miracles, but not in mental impossibilities. End of quotation here. So that's the important passage. The repetitions of physical facts and events may well be matters of childish or divine delight, G.K. goes on to say, not the dull routine of determinists. Once this distinction I spoke of is in place, G.K. can say, I always believed that the world involved magic, as well as a magician, or in another formula, that there is a story and a storyteller in the world of events. Modern scientific thought also ran contrary to the second of, and I'm getting close to the end, of G.K.'s fairyland sentiments. There was much talk among scientists of the immensity of the universe, as well as its fatalism. It is so large that it is the only thing there is. But, says G.K., if that were the case, why bother to call it large? There is nothing to compare it with. One might as well think the universe as small, he writes. One is as good as the other. They are both mere sentiments. And if that is so, then one may as well imagine the universe as small and lovable. But when we love things, we tend to make diminutives of them. With this point, we have now reached the end of our little outline. Years ago, when I first read Orthodoxy in the chapter called The Ethics of Elfland, I scribbled a note to myself in the margin of my Doubleday imaged edition, which cost me 75 cents. The note said, check Chesterton's viewpoint on the laws of nature with Hume's critique of the principle of causality. Though I haven't read Hume since college, I seem still to remember that he, like Chesterton, did not believe that repetition of sequence implied causal necessity. One day I may check whether that old marginal jotting leads to anything worthwhile, but I feel safe in saying that Hume's critique of causality does not lead to a defense of the philosophy of fairyland. What again is the philosophy of fairyland? That the world is wonderful and wild, or in another phrasing, magical and lovable. These are the 2 points that summarize the spirit of Elfland's ethical laws, such as one finds in Cinderella or Beauty and the Beast. These 2 points, as I said before, constitute only an outline. There is more in the chapter called The Ethics of Elfland, and there is a good deal more in the book